Hi everyone, The Tale of Genji is considered the world's first ever novel written exactly 1,000 years ago by a female author, Shikibu Murasaki. In this video, I'll summarize the novel, tell you about the author and its influence on Japanese literature as well as politics. At the end, I'll tell you a few interesting things about the tale, so make sure you watch to the end. First, let me talk about the author. Lady Murasaki was born to a Japanese noble family called Fujiwara in the capital city of Kyoto. She was employed as a lady-in-waiting, which basically means a tutor or a personal poet for a princess at the Heian court, where she was asked to write entertaining tales. As we can see in the Tale of Genji, it appears it is primarily written for a female audience. The sex and the city of the day, so to speak, or 50 Shades of poetry. Shikibu Murasaki is not her real name, simply means ceremonial purple. In fact, all the characters in the Tale of Genji are called by their rank, not by name, so it can make the reading very confusing. Even today in Japan, there's a higher level of formality when it comes to names. Surnames or company names are used more often than first names. I sometimes think that we have names for what? We should just call each other by the color of our clothes. Like today you're purple, tomorrow I'm yellow. Without her real name, some people question whether she wrote this novel at all, or because she was a woman. When you read the description of masculine beauty quite obsessively, there's no doubt it was written by a woman. At the time, Japanese women were not allowed to use Chinese, the language of technology and literature. It was considered too masculine for them. But the irony is that most of the text available today about the Heian period was written by women. Women wrote in kana writing system, which is different from kanji, and today mostly used for children in Japan. Who knows, 1,000 years later from today, they might discover things that kids have written today. Japan at the time was distancing itself from China as the Tang dynasty, the most innovative and advanced empire, had declined. Japan was becoming more isolated and nationalistic. Japanese art and literature was emerging from the shadow of the Chinese. This was a period of peace as well. There is no mention of wars in the Tale of Genji. Like Basil Fawlty, don't mention the war. Even Genji's political exile for 2 years is voluntary. Now let me summarize the novel. The Tale of Genji has 54 chapters that can be read separately. Perhaps she wrote them in installment. It tells the story of Hikaru Genji, a prince and his romantic adventures with women, and his quest for meaning in life. Genji is the son of the emperor and a concubine. Therefore, he is not pure blood. With no real royal duties, he chased women and smoked weed, like Prince Harry. I'm only kidding. He's not only beautiful, as his name Hikaru means shining, he's also a poet, thinker, and a very sensitive man, which women loved at the time. He is in search of a perfect woman, so he sleeps with a lot of them. Some are his wives, some are through secret affairs, some old, some young, high rank, low rank. He even has a child with his stepmother behind his father's back. Does he get all the women he wants? The answer is no. Some women refuse, some escape, some become Buddhist nuns to stop all men from pursuing them. Genji lost his mother at a young age, so he's infatuated with any woman who resembles his mother. Wow, very Freudian. He kidnaps a 10-year-old girl called Murasaki, not the author though, but a girl who resembles Genji's mother, in order to raise her as a perfect lady, and sleeps with her when she is only 12. She becomes a central character throughout the novel, and Genji seems to love her the most, but of course cheats on her a million times, and her suffering brings the most anguish for Genji. Her death seems to be his own end as well. Genji is not just a womanizer or a playboy. He is nervous, anxious, stressed of secrecy, has bad dreams, and goes through the ups and downs of any romance. Despite all this, he cannot stop. One could say he was obsessed with women, but never satisfied. Other men go for women of power and money, but Genji's motivation seems to be purely romantic or sexual, and always goes for the difficult or unusual relationships. Most women can't resist him either, as he seems to have everything. He's beautiful, he's intelligent, and has access to royal court. There are no villains in this story, in a conventional sense. One can say Genji is the hero and a villain at the same time, as he causes a lot of miseries on his wives, especially Murasaki. But there's one lady whose spirit seems to haunt everyone, Lady Rakujo. But even she is not a real villain, so the book seems to suggest that there's no good and evil when we have both. The book covers some 70 years, all Genji's romantic and political adventures. After Genji's death, it takes a more pessimistic tone as it follows his sons and grandsons' romantic adventures. Genji's death is marked by an empty chapter, which is a clever storytelling device, I think. The English author David Mitchell uses it in his number 9 Dream by leaving the last chapter empty. In those days, married couples slept in different rooms, so this allows frequent affairs to take place. A lot of communication happens through gestures and poetry. If you're expecting some hot, steamy sex scenes, you will be disappointed. You have to read between the lines, or read 50 Shades of Grey. The Tale of Genji is very subtle. The rustle of silken dress, youthful voice, suppressed laughter, these are all you get. The rest, your own imagination. Despite not having a clear plot, The Tale of Genji reads like a modern novel as the people and their emotions are portrayed realistically despite their archaic mode of communication. Overall, it's about love in all its forms, from the most beautiful, poetic and sublime to the most ridiculous, tragic and terrible. Love in all its forms and colors that even today's novels find too risky to tackle. Okay, now I'm going to share a few things that I found interesting in this novel. The first thing is suffering. The main theme of the novel follows the Buddhist view that life is nothing but suffering. All the affairs result in sorrow and anguish. Very little triumph. Sorrow is sometimes glorified as beautiful instead of the overt happiness. The Japanese concept mono no aware, which is literally everything passing, a fleeting sadness that is beautiful. The most unique thing the Tale of Genji offers is that the first time in the history we have an emotional record of a historical period. Women cry a lot. Men define a perfect woman as loyal, cultured, passive, and someone who ignores a man's shortcomings. Also, she doesn't speak the masculine, coarse Chinese language, but speaks the feminine Japanese. And she's not concerned with politics. Interestingly, Japanese people even today don't discuss politics openly. A perfect man, good looking, with a lot of skills, poetic, but above all, a sensitive man. Perhaps for the first time we read a woman's perspective on how they suffered throughout the history in the hands of men. However, you get the feeling Murasaki the author wasn't a big fan of many women, except the young Murasaki, Genji's beloved wife. The author and Genji's wife both have Murasaki as their names, but I don't think they are the same person. Women versus men. On the surface, you might think Genji has a fantastic life. Lots of women, no real job to do, always goes from one ceremony to another, and lives a luxurious life as emperor's son. But most of the time, he's in distress and unhappy. With every new sexual conquest, he has to suffer with anxiety that comes after, which seems like the author is taking revenge on men. But in reality, she depicts a real person who cannot help it. It appears Lady Murasaki knew men so well that despite what most women thought of men as terrible for causing women a lot of misery, but the author knows that on the deeper emotional level, men are the losers. At the end, Genji acknowledges the suffering of women in the hands of men. His beloved wife, Murasaki's selflessness, sacrifices, and silent suffering cause the most pain on Genji. It's not the people involved, it's love itself that causes misery. Very similar to Proust. We all desire things we cannot have. Love and jealousy are inseparable. For as long as we love, we suffer. So, a few women escape this vicious cycle of love, jealousy, and hate by becoming Buddhist nuns. I suppose it has a Buddhist message that in order to be happy, you should really detach yourself from love, money, power, and so forth. Japanese nationalism. Meiji period, which was from 1870s, Japan adopted a Western technology but went for everything Japanese as opposed to Chinese. Shintoism became state religion, not Buddhism, because it had come from China. Nationalism demanded Japanese cultural identity, so intellectuals and scholars found the Tale of Genji like a sacred text to show Japanese superiority. For example, Shinobu Orikuchi, a Japanese folklorist, asks, "What is China?" He answers, "The people who don't know the Tale of Genji." Another intellectual, Ito Jun, suggested that the West values patriarchy, while Japan is a very maternal, and points at this novel as an evidence. Yamato Damashi, or the Japanese spirit, was first mentioned in this tale. Yamato is the name of ancient Japan, before the contact with Chinese, who named it Japan, or the land where the sun rises from, and the arrival of Buddhism. Just remember the Heian period, the Japanese loved everything about China, and especially the Tang dynasty. Lady Murasaki praises the Japanese spirit that grows within a Chinese education. But later intellectuals and politicians, especially in 19th century and 20th century, understood the whole work as a Japanese and nothing else. But today most Japanese know the tale taught in schools, but very few have read it. I think it was the interest from the West that prompted the Japanese intellectuals to value it even more. Translation. The funny thing is that most Japanese today read Tale of Genji in translation. Why? Because it was written in court Japanese for the very select few educated courtiers. so it's very formal and archaic. It's taught in schools with some level of special skills and dedication a Japanese can understand it. The most accessible translation of the Tale of Genji in English is the Tale of Genji, which was published in 2001, as it explains everything in the footnotes. It's not an easy read, but it has a few famous fans. Jorge Luis Borges, who I talked about in my Argentine literature video, was a huge fan for its depiction of human passion and psychological depth. Virginia Woolf too loved this novel. It is true Don Quixote by Cervantes has a more Aristotelian structure of beginning, middle and end, but there's no doubt about the level of realism and psychological depth in the Tale of Genji to make it the first modern novel. In the next video, I'll compare this novel with the Persian epic poem of Shahnameh by Ferdowsi, which was also written around the same time. I'm on a journey to read books and stories from every country on earth, so if you want to tag along, please subscribe, share and comment, as it helps the channel. Thank you and happy reading.